All right, good afternoon, everybody. I think most everyone is here, so we'll get started with today's briefing on Tropical Storm Nicholas. So here's the overview of Nicholas. Nicholas is forecast to, Nicholas, first of all, formed in the southwest Gulf overnight and early this morning. It's named a tropical storm by the National Hurricane Center, as you can see in the southwest Gulf east of Veracruz State. It is forecast to scoot quickly along the northeast Mexican and lower Texas coast tonight and Monday. Tropical storm warnings and storm surge watches are in effect along the Cameron through Kennedy County coastline. Strong winds, minor rainfall, flooding, beachfront flooding, and dangerous surf are the potential impacts to prepare for in these areas. The event time is now focused squarely on the day of Monday, meaning from midnight tonight through midnight Monday. And you can see on satellite, compared to yesterday, Nicholas is nicely organized, and the center is actually moving at a good clip to the north that is still a bit east of Veracruz, but maybe nearing the Veracruz-Tamaulipas border, fairly far east of there. But you can see it's not that far to reach the lower Texas coast or the area east of there. So we do believe the storm will be small in size in terms of those stronger winds when it passes near or just inland of the Cameron-Willacy-Kennedy County coast. The exact location of the center will determine the extent of impacts on land. So here's the deal. A center remaining offshore with sharply reduced rainfall amounts from coast to inland location with limited impacts to the mid to upper valley, if any rain falls there at all. But a center moving just inland, say along or just east of Interstate Highway 69 East, would create significant impacts from Cameron to Kennedy County, but much less across the mid and upper valley. As an example of a similar storm in 2010, not too different in time of year, with September 7th then, Tropical Storm Hermine made a quick beeline right across the coastline in Tamaulipas, continued to intensify into Cameron County, and then moved north-northwest, ultimately affecting the Austin-San Antonio area. But impacts were wide-ranging. We had up to 8 inches of rain in rural southern Willacy County and virtually no rain from McAllen westward. So that potential exists with this storm. So don't hang your hat on a explicit forecast right now. You need to be prepared for reasonable worst cases, not just the actual forecast right now. Mentioned again, the event is developing and moving quickly. For areas under watches and warnings, sunset today is recommended for wrapping up your preparedness. You don't have much more time because some of the impacts may begin as early as post-midnight tonight. So here's some general information on hazard levels or threat levels. Wind and surge are elevated. Again, this is mainly Cameron, Willacy, and Kennedy County that we're looking at here. Potential for rainfall and flash flooding is a little more moderate. In other words, if it rains hard for 2 hours, we're going to have some flooding rain out there in the same areas we mentioned before. No threats of river flooding or tornadoes at this point. Marine is the major threat. So one thing to possibly watch for if you are with the Port of Brownsville or with Cameron County is we could see a number of Mexican vessels come into the ship channel and seek shelter in the Brownsville channel towards the basin. This happened with Hermine. We had 68 ships come in. These were, again, Mexican fishing and shrimping vessels that came in. So it wouldn't surprise me one iota if that happened due to the rapid development of the system east of the Mexican coast. So it's just something to keep an eye on as we move into Monday. So the inland flooding rainfall forecast, which remains the #1 potential impact, timing again, mainly Monday, midnight to midnight. In fact, we just got off the phone with our Weather Prediction Center. We're thinking timing will be pre-dawn Monday till mid to late afternoon Monday for the heaviest of the rain, given the size of the storm and the movement of the storm. This is not going to dally. The storm will be moving. So regardless of totals, though, some areas will receive beneficial rains. After all, we've had a prolonged period of drying since mid-July across much of the Rio Grande Valley, in particular parts of Cameron County. If we get some of these rains, it'll turn some of that brown green. But remember, this is the wettest 7-day period of the calendar year. In fact, we're on the wettest days of the calendar year as this tropical system moves through. In areas where rain band produced 2 inches of rain per hour for up to 2 hours, you could see 2+ feet of water depth, and that would create flooding in poor drainage locations. So this is the 2 by 2 by 2 rule in poor drainage areas. And we're really focusing on the Cameron-Willacy County locations along and east of Expressway 77, Interstate Highway 69E. So let's go to wind potentials and wind impacts. There's a reasonable worst case scenario for 40-mile-per-hour wind gusts and any stronger rain bands in Hidalgo County east of Interstate Highway 69C. That's your McAllen, Far, Edinburgh area towards the east. But 50 to 60-mile-per-hour gusts and stronger bands in Cameron County and Willacy County along and east of Highway 69E. And if that does happen, you can expect minor damage to lightweight objects, fences, and trees. There's a reasonable worst case scenario for 60+ mile per hour gusts. That's the orange area here, and some damage to unfastened objects and trees on South Padre. And then isolated power outages in Hidalgo if the reasonable worst case scenario comes to fruition. And then scattered power outages in Cameron and Willacy, once again, if the reasonable worst case comes to fruition. Now, the expected forecast based on the Hurricane Center's track in the wind field is 35 to 50 mile per hour or higher gusts in the Port Isabel, South Padre, Port Mansfield area, with isolated to scattered power outages and some minor tree or fence damage. And then just 25 to 35 mile per hour gusts from Brownsville to Harlingen through Raymondville in those stronger bands, with just 15 to 25 mile per hour gusts in Hidalgo County, mainly along and east of Interstate Highway 69C. So if you're in Starr County or if you're in Zapata County in the Rio Grande Plains, you're not going to get much from this storm. In fact, you're going to continue the dry weather, which is below average for this time of year. So earliest reasonable time of arrival. This is an important graphic because of the changing nature of the speed of the system. So the most likely time of arrival as of the 10 a.m. update from the Hurricane Center in Cameron and Willacy was Monday noon through Monday late afternoon. However, this area could see tropical storm force winds as early as daybreak Monday, meaning we're talking 18 hours from now or less. So it has sped up a little bit on the latest model guidance, so it may come a bit sooner, and that's why we're showing both of these graphics so you all can be prepared for that possibility. Now, this graphic shows the probabilities of tropical storm force winds, in this case, 39 mile per hour or greater. And I always like to say the nose. Look at the nose of stronger winds. And in the yellow, we're part of the nose, and that includes that South Padre, Port Isabel, Port Mansfield, Bayview area. And the value here is between 3 and 5 in 10 chance for 40 mile per hour greater winds. There's a 1 in 2 in 10 chance for the same winds elsewhere in the populated valley up to Brooks County, but a less than 1 in 10 chance as you get farther west into the Rio Grande Plains. Once again, that prime time is going to be Monday from late morning through early evening, but the potential for earlier arrival as early as pre-dawn, just before, say, 7 a.m., does exist, as we showed in the last graphic. So we need to be prepared for that potential earlier time. Now, as far as the damaging winds, we're talking about 58 mile per hour winds. These are what we base severe thunderstorm warnings on in the summertime and in the spring. This is the damage potential wind, and you can see it's a pretty low value, just a 1 to 2 in 10 chance for roughly 60 mile per hour greater winds along Laguna Madre and along South Padre Island, all the way up to Port Mansfield. So those areas are certainly at threat. The highest values here are in the Gulf. So one thing we want to tell everybody is postpone, cancel any boating or fishing plans starting now, basically, because it's raining out there, it's a little bit rough, all the way into early Tuesday. And hopefully by later Tuesday, we'll be getting back to some normalcy. So finally, we want to talk about storm surge and tidal run-up. So the reasonable worst case scenario for peak inundation along all of South Padre and Padre Island, this includes the city as well as the island itself, is 2 to 4 feet above normally high ground. What do we mean by that? So if you go to the beach and you put your toes where the waves tend to break at high tide, where your toes first see the water foam, now add 2 to potentially 4 feet at that level. Now, the most likely scenario, though, is water levels of 1.5 to 2.5 feet above normally high ground at that point. And what does that mean? Well, there's going to be more water running up to the beaches. So our impacts at this point, we expect seawater to go into the dunes at narrow beaches. These are basically the public access beaches, numbers 4 through 6 and beyond, heading up towards the Port Mansfield jetties. Then up to the dunes at the wider beaches. Many of those beaches were dredged in the spring, and you've all noticed how wide they've been. Well, there won't be very wide on Monday. In fact, there probably won't be hardly any beach at all. But we do think that the dunes will protect the beaches, and certainly the properties behind them with this event. We're not expecting any significant flooding over the seawall and onto places like Gulf Boulevard. Now note that high tides are at 12:02 a.m. tomorrow and at 1:36 a.m. Tuesday morning. And that's actually good news for us because low tide is at 2:38 p.m. on Monday, and this could be around the time of the peak run-up based on the location of the center of Nicholas and the action from the seas moving from east or east-southeast to west or west-northwest, piling that water up. This may be coming at low tide, which will spare us some of the worst case scenarios, and that's good news. So stay tuned for that, but we'll still have water running up even at low tide. It's definitely not going to be a beach day by any stretch on Monday. So based on that, what might it look like? This photo was taken from the tidal run-up from Hurricane Zeta, which was in the eastern Gulf last October. Rough and confused surf, however, will join the party, and we expect waves to be 8 to 10 feet all day on Monday, but they won't just be waves. There'll be a lot of roughness in there, lots of foam, lots of white caps. And rain most of the day, though, should keep people out of the surf, and it's also a school and work day. So not expected to have many impacts on the numbers of people compared to what we've just seen over the weekend, where we had good crowds on South Padre. So finally, the key takeaways. Your main threats in location: flooding rainfall and strong winds favoring locations east of IH-69E, which is Cameron-Willisey County. We're basically saying east of Harlingen, east of Brownsville, east of Raymondville, but we are including Port Mansfield, Laguna Madre, Laguna Heights, Port Isabel, and South Padre, and even Bayview, to name a few. The timing for everybody, the broad brush of timing here is midnight tonight through midnight Monday night. The peak rainfall and wind timing, we're looking at pre-dawn through late afternoon Monday. That's our best guess right now as we begin to see the system develop and the current movement and expected movement of the system for the next 24 hours. But there is still uncertainty in final track. The small storm size could dramatically change where and if impacts occur, reminding you to say that if it goes inland a bit, we'll see much greater impacts than we would if it goes offshore because of the size being fairly small, at least as it passes our coastline. Farther east in the Gulf, there'll be lesser impacts. Farther west over coastal counties, there'll be greater impacts, again, based on what we're seeing with the current track now. Now, when we mean farther east, we're not saying in the Gulf waters. If the storm moves farther east in the Gulf, there'll be lesser impacts on land and even at the beaches. But if it's farther west, we'll see greater impacts. And finally, no matter what forecast track we look at, there are minimal impacts in the upper valley, as we like to say down here, and the Rio Grande Plains. That includes Zapata, Star, and Jim Hogg County. So if you're asking about future briefings, we'll probably do an updated email after 4 p.m. when we get the latest from the Hurricane Center. Now, if this thing is strengthening and forecast to become a hurricane, and that's not out of the realm of possibility, but not expected now, we will fire off an updated webinar probably as early as 5 p.m. today. If not, just look for an updated email briefing. We'll be continuing those through the night, and if necessary, we'll schedule another webinar tomorrow. Time to be determined, but probably closer to 10:30, 11 a.m. To get everybody updated on the latest Hurricane Center forecast and ahead of the Texas State call, which is currently scheduled for noon. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording and take